Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been playing guitar since I was a kid. Music's always been my escape, you know? When I was in high school, I met this guy in my math class. Let's just call him my friend. We bonded over our love for rock music and decided to start a band. We weren't great at first, but we practiced hard, eventually got pretty good. The thing is, finding a place to practice was always a pain. Lugging equipment back and forth was a nightmare, until my friend's grandpa on his mom's side offered to let us use his house. It was perfect. We could leave our gear there and practice whenever we wanted. Everything was going great until a few months ago when my friend's parents had this huge blowout. His mom had finally had enough of his dad being a deadbeat. I mean, the guy hadn't worked in 10 years and refused to even look for a job. So his mom tells his dad to pack up and get out. The thing is, he left most of his stuff in the garage. We're talking boxes stacked to the ceiling, taking up half the space. It was a real pain, but we dealt with it. His mom gave him a month to come get his stuff, but he never showed. He just moved in with his own dad, my friend's other grandpa. Now here's where things get crazy. Last week, my friend starts getting these angry texts from his dad. The guy's all paranoid, thinking we're trying to sell his old drum kit on Craigslist. My friend tells him it's still in the garage and he can come get it anytime. But his dad's not buying it. So his dad shows up when we're not around and takes his drum kit. But that's not all. He also helps himself to a bunch of our equipment. We're talking cymbals, snare drums, microphones, and even one of my Fender Telecasters. Hundreds of dollars worth of our stuff gone. When we found out, we were furious. My friend called his dad demanding to know what the hell he was thinking. His dad claimed it was payback for us trying to sell his drum kit, then hung up. Now we could have called the cops, but I had a better idea. See, since his dad never came back for his stuff after that month's notice, technically it was all abandoned property. So we decided to have a little yard sale. We priced everything at 5 cents a piece. Word spread like wildfire, and soon the whole neighborhood was picking through his dad's belongings. Tools, video games, TVs, clothes, you name it. We sold it. By the end of the day, we'd made about 20 bucks in nickels. Whatever was left, we donated to Goodwill, except for his clothes. Those we burned in a fire pit. The next morning, we headed over to my friend's other grandpa's house, where his dad was staying. It was early, around 8 a.m. His grandpa answered the door and invited us in. We explained everything that had happened. Let me tell you, his grandpa was livid. He woke up my friend's dad and really let him have it. Then he made him give back all our music equipment and apologize. When we were leaving, I couldn't resist. I handed his dad a jar full of nickels and told him what we'd done with all his stuff. He looked at me, confused and angry, asking about the nickels. I explained they were the proceeds from his yard sale, where everything was priced at 5 cents. His confusion turned to shock as I told him about selling all his abandoned stuff from the garage. He got really angry, insisting we had no right to touch his things. I calmly explained that we did have the right since his ex-wife had given him a month to get his stuff, and he didn't. It was legally abandoned property at that point. He threatened to sue us, but I reminded him that he had stolen hundreds of dollars worth of our equipment, which was probably a felony. That shut him up pretty quick. He told us to get out of his sight, and I happily obliged, telling him to enjoy his nickels as we left. Sure, maybe what we did was a bit extreme, but at least we got our equipment back. A few years back, I hit it big with a tech startup. Made more money than I knew what to do with. Being the cautious type, I invested most of it for the long haul, enough to live comfortably without working but not exactly living large. After a while, I got bored. Decided to go back to college, maybe make some friends. That's where things got complicated. I'm not great at socializing, small talk isn't my thing, and I tend to be wary of overly friendly people. But suddenly I had a group practically begging to hang out with me. It felt nice, Should have known it was too good to be true. Turns out they'd Googled me and found out about my windfall. At first it was small stuff. One of them would ask for a loan, claiming to be short on cash for the month and asking if I could spot them $100. I'd agree, thinking it was no problem. But when I'd ask for it back later, they'd apologize and say they forgot, promising to pay me back next time. It started adding up, but I didn't want to lose my only friends. Then came the vacation idea. One of my friends suggested we all go to Disney World, saying it would be amazing. When I mentioned it sounded fun but expensive, Karen chimed in, insisting I could afford it and that it would be the trip of a lifetime. I tried to explain that I didn't have that kind of cash on hand, but they wouldn't let up. The pressure was intense. Eventually, I caved and took an advance on my monthly payout to cover it all: flights, hotels, tickets, everything. But once we got there, they ditched me. Every single day. I'd ask if they wanted to check out a new ride, and they'd reply that they had already made plans with some people they met. When I'd suggest dinner, Karen would say they had already eaten and brush me off with a vague, maybe next time. By the end of the trip, I was fuming. These weren't friends. They were using me. That's when I hatched the plan. I'd seen an article about this local restaurant with a ridiculously expensive dish, like $1,000 a plate. I started accidentally, leaving the article open when they were around, mentioning it in conversation. Eventually, they took the bait. Karen excitedly suggested we try the fancy dish, gushing about how amazing it looked. When I hesitated, mentioning I was still paying off the vacation, another friend brushed off my concerns, reminding me that I was loaded and insisting it would be fun. I made it clear I could only pay for myself. They seemed nervous but agreed. The day came and we all went to the restaurant. The manager came over, looking serious. The manager asked if we were sure we could afford the expensive meal. Karen confidently assured him we weren't poor and could definitely afford it. The meal itself? Awful. Salty, slimy, like soggy fries. But I kept that to myself. When we finished, I could see them getting antsy. Then the bill came. I paid for my portion. Everyone else's cards? Declined. Karen slid her bill to me with a smirk, asking if I could cover it. I told her I actually couldn't, explaining I didn't have enough in my account. My friends were shocked, asking how that was possible since I was rich. I reminded them that I was still paying off the vacation and had only brought enough for my meal. I stood up to leave. They started panicking. Karen exclaimed that I couldn't just leave them there. I apologized, saying I had made plans with some other people and told them I'd see them around. I walked out, ignoring their protests. Later, I found out the manager called the cops. They didn't get arrested, but they had to go to court, pay the bill, and a hefty fine on top. The university put them on probation. I told everyone on campus they tried to dine and dash, but I didn't go into details, just said they attempted to run out on a huge bill. Word spread fast, and suddenly they were the campus pariahs. I feel a bit bad about how it all went down, but they brought it on themselves. They saw me as a walking ATM, not a friend. And in the end, their greed cost them way more than just a fancy meal. It cost them their reputations and nearly their future at the university. I've been with the traveling carnival for a few months, working my way up from green help to a regular ride operator. The Silver Streak was like a smaller version of the Himalaya. You know, that ride that spins you around in circles while blasting music. It was my job to check tickets, manage the line, and make sure everyone was safe. One scorching afternoon, I was letting folks onto the ride when I heard the exit gate slam shut. I turned to see a woman, her husband, and 4 young kids marching in through the exit. Sighing, I excused myself from the entrance and approached them. I politely asked the woman and her family to exit and come in through the proper entrance. The woman, who I'll call Karen, rudely replied that the line was too long and that they were riding now. I apologized but explained that I couldn't let them skip the line as it wouldn't be fair to the other guests. Karen then declared loudly that she didn't care about the others and insisted that she and her children would ride the ride. She turned her nose up at me while her husband just stood there like a statue. I looked at the growing line at the entrance and knew I had to handle this quickly. I addressed the waiting guests, apologizing for the delay and explaining that we had a situation with people who came in the wrong way. I assured them I'd sort it out as soon as possible. I tried calling my supervisor but couldn't reach them. Luckily, I spotted some police officers nearby and waved them over. I explained the situation, and they went to talk to Karen and her family. One of the officers instructed Karen to follow the ride operator's instructions. Karen responded with threats, claiming she was on the fair board and knew the state senator. She threatened to have all our jobs for this. I rolled my eyes. Classic Karen move. I told the officers that if Karen and her family wouldn't leave and enter properly, I wanted them removed from the ride. Karen and her brood refused to budge. Finally, I got hold of my unit manager, who came over to assess the situation. My unit manager told Karen she needed to follow the operator's directions and leave the ride. Karen refused, insulting me by calling me a backcountry hillbilly piece of trash. My manager defended me, stating that I was actually from Dallas, but insisted that wasn't the point and that Karen needed to leave immediately. Karen then demanded that we be arrested for child endangerment, claiming the rides were unsafe. My manager gave Karen an ultimatum. She had 5 seconds to get off the ride and leave the carnival, or she'd be forcibly removed. Karen, of course, didn't move an inch. By now we had 10 cops, including 2 state troopers surrounding the ride. My manager gave the nod, and the officers moved in to remove Karen and her family. When they were being escorted out, Karen completely lost it. She started kicking and screaming, making a real spectacle of herself. The crowd watching was getting a kick out of it, especially when another ride nearby started blasting "Hit the Road Jack." But Karen wasn't done yet. When they reached the parking lot, she went full nuclear. She kicked 3 cops, hit both state troopers, and even spat at another officer. Talk about digging yourself deeper. I went back to operating the ride, letting the next couple of groups ride for free and a bit longer than usual as a thank you for their patience. Everyone was having a great time now that Hurricane Karen had passed. A few weeks later, I got a surprise. Karen was suing me and my manager for emotional distress. We had to go to court, but I wasn't worried. When we showed up, it was like a police convention. All 10 officers who'd been there that day came to testify. In the courtroom, Karen tried to play the victim, but nobody was buying it. The judge listed the charges against Karen, including multiple counts of assault on a peace officer, attempted assault, resisting arrest, and criminal trespassing. When asked how she pleaded, Karen claimed not guilty, accusing us of discriminating against her and her children. But the evidence was too much. Between my testimony, my manager's account, and 10 police officers all saying the same thing, Karen didn't stand a chance. The judge threw the book at her. She got a long prison sentence. I can't remember exactly how many years, but it was a lot. No chance of parole either. They shipped her off to Gatesville Women's State Prison. Of course, she tried to appeal, but it was useless. The case went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, where she also lost. I heard that Karen became notorious in prison. Apparently, she tried to pull the same entitled act with the guards and other inmates. Let's just say it didn't go over well. Anyways, now I've got my Karen radar on high alert. But so far, nobody stopped that day. Here's hoping it stays that way. I've been a wedding planner for some years now, and I absolutely love my job. But this one bride, she took things to a whole new level of entitlement. When she contacted me about planning her dream wedding, she seemed nice enough at first, gushing about how she'd heard great things about my work. We set up a meeting to discuss her vision. When we met, she laid out her plans for an extravagant affair, a destination wedding at a luxury resort, gourmet catering, designer dresses for the whole bridal party, and so on. I was excited about the challenge, but when I started discussing budgets and deposits, things took a turn. The bride shocked me by declaring she wouldn't be paying for anything. She told me I should be grateful she was even considering me as her planner and asked if I knew how much publicity this would bring to my business. I tried to explain that's not how it works and that I couldn't provide services for free, especially for such a big event. She then asked if I knew who she was, bragging about her huge social media following and claiming one post from her could make or break my career. I attempted to explain that while I appreciated her interest, I couldn't work for free. She stormed out. A week later, she called me again. She told me she'd decided to give me another chance, but had changed her mind about the wedding. She now wanted it to be local instead of at the resort and demanded it to happen next week. I told her that was impossible since we hadn't even signed a contract or made any arrangements. She insisted I make it happen and then demanded I pay for her bridesmaids' designer dresses, warning me they weren't cheap. I was speechless. This woman was clearly delusional. I apologized but said I couldn't do that, explaining it was impossible to plan a wedding in a week, and I certainly couldn't pay for her bridesmaids' dresses. She then demanded I get a celebrity chef she saw on TV to cater the wedding. I pointed out there was no budget for that and suggested it might be best if she found another planner. A few days later, I got served with legal papers. This woman was suing me for emotional distress, claiming I'd ruined her wedding plans and her life. I was stunned. I hired a lawyer, confident that the case would be thrown out. But the bride wasn't done. She started an online smear campaign against me. Suddenly, my social media was flooded with negative comments. People I'd never met were calling me a scammer and a thief. It was a nightmare. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed, but the damage to my reputation was done. I had to work hard to rebuild my business and my name in the industry. Just when things were starting to look up, I got engaged myself. I was over the moon, excited to plan my own wedding for once. But even that joy was short-lived. On my wedding day, as I was getting ready, my maid of honor came rushing in. She frantically told me that the crazy bride was there, trying to get into the venue. This woman had actually shown up to crash my wedding as some sort of twisted revenge. Thankfully, my friends and family were prepared. They'd heard all about her and were on high alert. My brother-in-law, a police officer, was more than happy to escort her off the premises. When she was being led away, she was screaming about how I'd ruined her life and how I didn't deserve to be happy. Despite the drama, my wedding day was still perfect. My new husband and I laughed about the incident during our first dance, grateful for the love and support of our real friends and family. My business has recovered, and I'm back to doing what I love, helping couples have the wedding of their dreams. Just, with actual contracts and payments involved. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.